Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today I wanted to introduce you to one of my longest running hobby projects, my homebrew Space Marine Chapter, the Chevaliers. They're essentially Bretonnian-inspired Space Marines, an idea I'd been playing around with for years. The biggest hurdle was always the models. On the older Firstborn Marines, knightly helmet crests always looked a little oversized and out of proportion, but once the Primaris range arrived with its larger scale, everything finally clicked into place, and I could finally build the chapter I'd always imagined. But before we take a look at all of the miniatures, I thought I'd first walk you through the lore behind the chapter, where they came from, how they fight, and why they look so different from almost every other chapter in the Imperium. The story begins on the feudal world of Brettoncourt IV. Hidden away in the eastern fringe of the Segmentum Ultima, Brettoncourt IV is a fertile agricultural world with dense forests, rolling hills, and vast stretches of open grassland. Its people live much as humanity did during the late medieval period of Old Terra. Knights ride to war beneath brightly coloured banners, castles dominate the countryside, and the authority of noble houses shapes every aspect of daily life. Imperial scholars believe that Brettoncourt IV was first settled during humanity's golden age of technology. Unlike many lost colonies, however, its people never truly recovered from the Age of Strife. The horrors unleashed by uncontrolled technology left scars that endured for generations. Machinery became synonymous with catastrophe, and over the centuries much of the world's technological knowledge was deliberately abandoned in favour of a simpler existence. When the fires of Old Night finally faded, Brettoncourt had become a world of kings, castles and steel. Ironically, the peace its ancestors sought never came. As memories of the Age of Strife faded into legend, rival kingdoms once again turned upon one another, castles changed hands, villages were burnt and rebuilt, and noble families waged endless wars to expand their domains. The near-constant conflict ensured civilization never truly advanced. Every generation rebuilt only what the previous one had destroyed. By the time the Imperium finally arrived, the greatest weapons on Brettoncourt IV were plate armour, long swords, lances and longbows. The planet remained forgotten for thousands of years. The Great Crusade had never reached this isolated pocket of space before the Horus Heresy consumed the Imperium. It was not until M38 that the world was finally rediscovered by the Archon Crusade of the Black Templars. For decades, the Crusade had fought across the eastern reaches of the Segmentum Ultima, reclaiming long-forgotten human worlds that had remained beyond Imperial rule since Old Night. When the Black Templars descended from the heavens, the nobles of Brettoncourt believed that they were witnessing the return of the warriors from their oldest legends. Towering knights clad in black armour, bearing swords, shields and great heraldric crosses, seemed less like mortal soldiers and more like the champions sent by the deity they had worshipped for millennia. Many of the ruling houses accepted imperial compliance willingly. The Black Templars did not demand that the people abandon their ancient faith. Instead, they revealed the true identity of the divine guardian their ancestors had worshipped for thousands of years. Their god had not forsaken them. He was the emperor of mankind, and his angels had finally arrived. Because the people of Brettoncourt had long worshipped a single divine protector, the imperial creed blended naturally with their existing beliefs. Likewise, the Black Templars' uncompromising hatred of witches, mutants and heretics echoed traditions that had endured on the world since the Age of Strife. Not every kingdom submitted so readily, however. Several powerful realms rejected the Emperor's rule, clinging to older polytheistic faiths and refusing to bend the knee. Their resistance was brief. Against the might of the Adeptus Astartes, armies of knights and longbowmen stood little chance. Castle walls that had resisted generations of rival kings crumbled before bolt shells and melter-fire. Within a matter of weeks, the last banners of rebellion had fallen. Brettoncourt IV had finally been brought into the Imperium. For nearly 4,000 years, generation after generation of Brettoncourt's greatest warriors disappeared into the ranks of the Black Templars. The world became one of the chapter's most dependable recruiting grounds. Its people remained remarkably free from mutation and the taint of corruption, while their unwavering faith in the God Emperor and deeply ingrained martial traditions made them ideal candidates for one of the Imperium's most zealous chapters. Then, with the coming of the Ultima founding, everything changed. Brettoncourt IV was selected as the homeworld of a newly established Primaris chapter, the Chevaliers. Founded from the gene seed of the Imperial Fists, they inherited the genetic legacy of the Primarch Rogel Dawn, just like the Black Templars before them. This shared lineage was no coincidence. Millennia of Black Templar influence had shaped Brettoncourt into the ideal home for a new chapter descended from Dawn's bloodline. A cadre of veteran Primaris Space Marines, drawn from the ranks of the Unnumbered Sons, arrived to establish the chapter, raise its fortress monastery, and begin the sacred duty of defending the Imperium. Though these warriors were seasoned veterans of the Indomitus Crusade, the chapter itself possessed neither history nor tradition. Recognizing this, the High Marshal of the Black Templars bestowed upon the fledgling chapter a number of veteran firstborn brothers born upon Brettoncourt IV. These warriors served not as commanders, but as mentors, instructors, and spiritual guides, ensuring that the customs of Rogel Dawn, the Black Templars, and their shared homeworld took root from the chapter's very first days. The people of Brettoncourt regarded the arrival of the Chevaliers as the greatest honour their world had ever received. Where once their finest sons had dreamed of joining the Black Templars, they now aspired to fight for the chapter that called their own world home. Before long, the Chevaliers drew almost all of their recruits from Brettoncourt itself, each new generation carrying the customs, faith, and knightly ideals of their world into the ranks of the Adeptus Astartes. Among the planet's noble houses, the selection of a son for the chapter's trials became the highest honour a family could receive. Entire generations were raised in the hope that one day a child might prove worthy of ascension into the ranks of the Emperor's Angels of Death. Under the guidance of their Brettoncourt-born mentors, the Chevaliers forged a character unlike any other chapter. They inherited the uncompromising zeal and martial discipline of the Black Templars, yet embraced the knightly traditions of their homeworld as the foundation of their own identity. Though the destriers of Brettoncourt had long since been replaced by roaring engines and armoured bikes, the spirit of the cavalry charge endured. Massed outrider assaults, spearheaded by mounted officers and supported by heavily armed bike squadrons, became the chapter's preferred method of war. The age of cavalry had never truly ended, it had merely traded horses for engines. At first glance, the Chevaliers scarcely resemble a conventional Space Marine chapter. Where the Ultramarines march in disciplined ranks of blue, or the Dark Angels in sombre green, every warrior of the Chevaliers appears unique. Quartered armour, checkers, stripes, heraldric beasts, towering helmet crests. No two battle brothers look exactly alike. Unlike most chapters of the Adeptus Astartes, the Chevaliers have never truly abandoned their individual connections to their past family. To them, heraldry is far more than decoration. It is a visible testament to honour, lineage, and the legacy of their world and forebears. Every battle brother bears the chapter's badge upon his left shoulder guard, a shield divided equally between red and blue, displaying a golden fleur-de-lis. Everything else is his own. Those born to Brettoncourt's noble houses wear their ancestral heraldry from the very moment they don the chapter's armour, yet these ancient coats of arms rarely remain unchanged. Every great victory, every glorious campaign, and every heroic deed may be commemorated through the addition of new charges, devices, and honours, until the armour of an ancient veteran becomes a living chronicle of centuries spent in the Emperor's service. Those of humble birth, and the original Primaris founders drawn from the Unnumbered Sons, begin their service wearing only the chapter's original colours of red and blue. Such plain armour carries no shame, it simply signifies that its bearer has yet to earn a legacy worthy of remembrance. Only after distinguished service is a low-born battle brother granted the right to bear a personal coat of arms. For a commoner, this honour is nothing less than ennoblement. His heraldry is bestowed upon his blood family, elevating them to noble status and granting future generations the right to bear his coat of arms in honour of the son they gave the chapter. When news of such an honour reaches Brettoncourt IV, celebration spreads across the Marines' homeland, villages feast, churches offer prayers of thanksgiving, and entire households rejoice as one of their own rises from common birth to stand among the greatest noble houses of the world. Few honours are held in higher esteem. Among the Chevaliers, an old saying endures: By bolter and chainsword, it matters not the colour of your plate, only that it is stained with the blood of the Emperor's foes. There is, however, one colour almost no warrior may wear: green. To the people of Brettoncourt, green belongs to the forest that sheltered humanity throughout the Age of Strife. According to ancient legend, an unseen guardian watched over those who sought refuge beneath the trees, protecting them from the darkness beyond. Following imperial compliance, that guardian came to be understood as the Emperor himself. As a result, green became sacred. Only the chapter's chaplains may bear it. Upon taking the forest vow, a chaplain abandons the heraldry of his birth forever, replacing it with the sacred green of Brettoncourt's ancient guardian. Despite their advanced war gear, the Chevaliers remain at heart knights. Their customs, traditions and ceremonies all descend from the feudal culture of their homeworld, and even their methods of war reflect this heritage. Rather than massed armoured assaults, the Chevaliers favour swift, decisive charges led by bike squadrons, echoes of the cavalry charges once ridden by their ancestors beneath Brettoncourt's ancient banners. The chapter maintains a full armoury of tanks and transports, but these are regarded as practical necessities rather than instruments of glory. Within the Chevaliers, true prestige belongs to those who fight from the saddle of a battle bike or endure the interred eternity of a dreadnought sarcophagus. Even the chapter's Invicta war suits are treated as knightly rectories, often modified with towering shields and oversized blades inspired by the legends of Brettoncourt. The influence of the Black Templars also remains deeply ingrained. Librarians are regarded with caution within the chapter, their psychic gifts seen as dangerous tools to be constrained rather than celebrated. Only one is permitted to move freely within the chapter's inner hierarchy. The chief librarian, known as Brother Merlin, answers directly to the chapter master. He serves as an advisor, an oracle, and an interpreter of the Emperor's will as revealed through the warp. He is seldom seen by battle brothers outside moments of dire significance. Faith is valued above psychic might, and unwavering devotion to the Emperor is considered the greatest weapon a warrior can wield. And wherever the Chevaliers wage war, their enemies soon learn that beneath the brightly coloured heraldry and noble pageantry beats the hearts of uncompromising crusaders. They may appear as knights of old, but they are, above all else, the Emperor's angels of death. So, with the lore covered, let's have a look at the miniatures themselves. I originally built these around 6 years ago now, and looking back there are definitely things I'd do differently today. Like any army, they're really a snapshot of where your hobby skills were at the time. That said, I'm still incredibly proud of the overall concept, and hopefully there are a few ideas here that might inspire your own projects. We'll start right at the very beginning. This was the very first Chevalier I ever built. He was essentially my proof of concept. Before committing to an entire army, I wanted to answer a simple question. Could a Bretonnian aesthetic actually work on a Primaris Space Marine? Fortunately, I think the answer was yes. He's also one of the only Marines in the entire collection without a helmet. I sculpted the chainmail coif from green stuff, added a simple circlet around his head, and from that point onwards, the visual identity of the chapter really began to take shape. From a lore perspective, he also represents one of the chapter's low-born initiates. As I mentioned earlier, the common-born recruits begin their service wearing the chapter's official colours before earning the right to bear their own heraldry. Once I was happy with this model, the rest of the army followed surprisingly quickly. One of the questions I get asked more than any other is how I make the helmets. They're actually a combination of two different kits. The faceplate and mascot comes from the old Bretonnian helmets, or occasionally Empire kits, while the front half of a standard Primaris helmet is cut away so the neck join still fits the Marine body correctly. It's a surprisingly straightforward conversion once you've done a few of them, and I ended up having to repeat it across the rest of the army. The fleur-de-lis on every shoulder pad was sculpted individually from green stuff as well. If you look through the army in chronological order, you can definitely see my sculpting improve over time. The first few are a little optimistic. Thankfully, practice makes perfect. One of my favourite parts of the project was painting the heraldry. Instead of painting 60 Marines in exactly the same colours, every single model became its own character. I deliberately limited myself to the 5 traditional Bretonnian colours, red, blue, yellow, black and white, and simply rearranged them into different combinations. And even the helmet mascots vary model to model. Rather than repeatedly use the same crest, I started raiding other Warhammer kits. One of my favourites is the Owl Crest taken from the Wood Elf range. It all helped reinforce the idea that every Chevalier is an individual knight with his own history. Moving on to the Assault Intercessors, these are fairly straightforward conversions, but I think they're the squad that really established the visual language of the army, bright heraldry, knightly helmets, just enough medieval detail to sell the illusion while still looking unmistakably like Space Marines. Next up are the Hellblasters. The Sergeant is probably my favourite model in the squad. He has a firstborn Black Templar torso that's been cut and modified to fit a Primaris model. If you want to know how I went about doing this, there is an old tutorial that I can link in the comment section. The plasma effects were also something I really wanted to experiment with. Years ago I'd made similar effects for my Vostroyans using heated Necron rods, so I decided to revisit the idea here with clear acrylic rods. Each piece was gently heated over a tea light candle before being twisted into shape. It took a lot of trial and error. I think I bought around 30 centimeters of acrylic rod, and these two were the only pieces that I was actually happy with. Once shaped, they were tinted with successive glazes to create the impression of superheated plasma erupting from the muzzle. I have heard every joke imaginable, however, about them looking like water pistols, but honestly, I think it works. The Intercessors contain a couple of my favourite little details. The Sergeant has an old epic scale Space Marine mounted to his wrist to represent a holographic tactical display. To help sell the illusion, I painted a subtle object source lighting effect across one side of his armour, as though the hologram itself was illuminating him. It's one of those tiny details that people can often miss until they see the model up close. And another Marine carries what is very obviously the Holy Hand Grenade. At some point the Monty Python references started creeping into the army, so I decided to stop resisting them. After all, the old Black Templar sprue did have the Holy Hand Grenade on it, so I'd argue it's completely lore accurate. The Outriders help sell the Bretonnian theme more than any other unit in the army. If I ever get back to doing this army properly, more bikers are a must. The lances are simply Bretonnian lance arms pinned straight through the rider's hands, but each bike tells its own story. One races across the remains of an ancient battlefield, complete with a rusted spear, a shattered shield, and the skeleton of a long-dead horse, a deliberate contrast between the knights of old and their far future descendants. Another crashes through the ruined walls of an abandoned castle. I'm lucky enough to live near a genuine castle ruin, so seeing the weathered stonework covered in white lichen gave me plenty of inspiration when building these bases. And the Sergeant has a Mark VI helmet, which is the only non-knightly helmet in the collection, but I think it works with his heraldry. Finally, we come to the attack bikes, and I'll be honest, I was never completely sold on the Invader ATV. Yahoo! I then discovered these fantastic 3D printed sidecar kits from Dark Age Designs, and they immediately felt like something the Chevaliers would actually use. The rider carries his own personal heraldry. The passenger, however, always wears the chapter's plain red and blue. I was unsure how I would tackle the painting of these sidecars. Would the sidecar be painted in the passenger's colours? But I think it would look a bit of a mess. So in the lore, these are young knights errant, low-born initiates who have yet to earn the right to bear their own coat of arms and therefore get paired with more experienced knights. It's a tiny detail, but I think it helps tie the models back into the lore. The red biker was straightforward enough, but the blue one became a bit of an issue during the build phase. You see, the kit only comes with one right hand off the handlebars, and I couldn't give this guy a lance in his left hand due to the sidecar, so I had to muck about with a different pose and then use the base to help tell a mini story that the ground has become too boggy and he's calling the convoy to a halt. The dreadnoughts were an opportunity to tell much larger stories. The blue and yellow dreadnought actually bears my own family heraldry, a bull's head pierced by a broken spear upon a blue field. Traditionally, the blue represents truth and loyalty, while the bull symbolises stubbornness, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a while since I researched it all. It felt fitting that one of the chapter's oldest heroes would bear the same device. To contrast this ancient warrior with his surroundings, I placed him striding through a wheat field, mainly due to the juxtaposition between the past and the future. The second dreadnought is, well, the Black Knight. As the army gained popularity online, more and more people started making Monty Python references, and eventually I thought, why fight it? If the Black Knight had somehow survived into the 41st millennium, he'd almost certainly be entombed within a dreadnought. I sculpted his heraldry onto the sarcophagus and recreated the famous bridge scene from the film, complete with the scattered remains of his previous challengers. It's probably the least serious model in the army, but it is one of my favourites. The captain was a much simpler conversion. Most of the work went into the shield, while the helmet crest was crowned to distinguish his rank from the rest of the chapter. I'm lucky enough that one of the Bretonnian crests had that little crown already on it. Simple changes, but I love adding tiny details into my models. The Blade Guard veterans naturally became my Grail Knights. In the lore, only the veterans of countless campaigns may add the Grail to their heraldry, marking them as warriors whose devotion to the Imperium has endured for centuries. The Grails themselves were actually made from tiny dollhouse accessories, because finding anything to fit the scale was really difficult. Although if I remember correctly, one or two might have also been upside down Skaven bells. Sometimes inspiration comes from strange places. The Emperor's Champion is the newest model in the collection and probably the most technically ambitious. Given the chapter's close ties to the Black Templars, I felt it only right that they should field an Emperor's Champion of their own. His eyes are actually fully illuminated using an LED hidden inside the helmet. To make that work, the miniature had to be hollowed out so wiring could pass through the torso, down the legs and into the battery concealed beneath the base. The helmet was hollowed out as well, and the eye lenses were then carefully removed. Once the helmet was painted, silicone was added to the LED sticking out of the model's neck and the helmet pushed over top. It was very much a one-shot job. Too much silicone and it'd end up looking permanently surprised. Fortunately, it did work. The Chaplain was my first attempt at creating the Green Knight from Bretonnian legend. Looking back, I think he's fine, but he also reminds me about how much I think I've improved as a painter. I don't think I'd paint green armour the same way today. It's funny how every hobbyist eventually looks back at their old armies and thinks, what on earth was I doing? Finally, we come to the Green Knight himself. This was inspired directly by the classic artwork from the old Bretonnian army book, showing the Green Knight appearing from nowhere to defend a humble man-at-arms against the beastmen. Just in the 40k version, we have a feudal guardsman and a motorbike. The conversion itself was extensive and took a while to complete. If you're interested in seeing the entire process, I've written a full hobby blog covering every stage, and I'll leave it linked in the comment section as well. So, there we have it, the Chevaliers, a project that's been evolving for years, combining two of my favourite Warhammer settings into something I always hoped could still feel believable within the universe of Warhammer 40,000. I hope you've enjoyed seeing both the lore and the models behind the chapter, and who knows, perhaps if more of us embrace the Chevaliers, we might even get officially recognised one day. Thanks for watching. If you've liked this video, do make sure to like this video, consider subscribing for more Warhammer 40k content, and in the meantime, do take it easy, and I will see you in the next one.